Hello, welcome to this lecture on culture and construction. In the last video on the self, we saw that we do not exist as islands, as mere individuals. Rather, human beings are fundamentally social creatures. You become yourself only through your interactions with other people and with the products of culture. This lecture demonstrates that we are not just social creatures, we are cultural ones. To do this, I'm first going to briefly cover a micro-theoretical perspective called symbolic interaction, which will help us think about the building blocks of culture, meaning. We'll define social constructs, culture, and socialization, and we'll talk about how any particular culture or subculture is viewed depending on whether it's your own or not. Key in this lecture is also the idea of social construction, which means that the meanings of things change over time and are not always shared, and that meanings have a wide range of relationships to one another. Taken together, the web of meanings and relationships between things and ideas and culture makes up the symbolic structure. It's our ability to think symbolically that makes us cultural creatures. So, let's start with a theoretical perspective that focuses on symbols. Remember that theories are like lenses. Some, like micro-level theories, allow us to zoom into a social phenomenon to look at it very closely, like how it is experienced by individuals. Others, macro-level theories, take a broader view of society, looking at the big stuff like social institutions. To explain what culture is, I want to start with its building blocks, most importantly, meaning. Symbolic interactionism is a micro-level theory that explores how people make meaning, how they make sense of things in their daily lives. It says that the small things pattern up to create the big things, just like individual Lego blocks snap together to create a building. Our entire society is possible because we share meaning. It is the building block of the self and of society. Herbert Blumer is the name of the sociologist who coined the term symbolic interaction, and his work draws heavily on the ideas of George Herbert Mead, whom you remember from the I and the Me. Symbolic interactionism is based on three main premises. First, we act toward things based on the meanings that those things hold for us. Second, those meanings arise through interaction with others. And third, meanings are modified through an interpretive process. This seems simple enough, but it's really quite complex. Number two is especially important. This means that meanings are not inherent. They're not innate properties of things. The same thing that is true for yourself, that it changes, it adapts, it's the product of social interaction, is true for everything. So, what is this? You will quickly see that the answer isn't as simple as it seems. Most students will tell me that this is a Coke, but that is wrong. This isn't a Coke. What is a Coke anyway? And if it's not a Coke, then what is it? Ah, students will say, you almost got us. It's a can of Coke. But no, you are still wrong. Wrong again. Not totally wrong, of course, but you're not going deep enough. You're not being objective enough. What precisely is this? Ah, okay, Dr. Kirshner, I get it, a clever student says. It's a picture of a can of Coke, and I say that you're getting warmer. What is the origin of this picture? Where is this picture? This is a picture, it's a representation of a can of Coke. The can of Coke that is in this picture may be in a landfill now, or recycled into another piece of aluminum. The original can of Coke, if this is a picture of an actual physical can of Coke that existed and not just digital art, which is not unlikely, the original can of Coke is gone. It has become a symbol, something that stands for a can of Coke. This representation of a can of Coke may be stored on a hard drive somewhere, or in the cloud. And what in the world is the cloud anyway? I downloaded this representation of a can of Coke from a server that I accessed via the internet and created a copy on my computer hard drive. Then I created another copy and put it on this PowerPoint slide. I uploaded the PowerPoint slide to D2L, or made a video on YouTube where you are now viewing it, or you downloaded it to your own device, creating yet another copy of this representation of a can of Coke. And each of you did this. So there are thousands of this representation of a can of Coke floating around the world. So back to the original question, what is this? I've tried to describe it objectively, but subjectively it's even more than what it appears to be. Coke has significance for you. Let's go back to Bloomer's 3 premises and apply them to a can of Coke. 1. We act toward things based on the meanings they hold for us. So, what does Coke mean to you? You might say that it's a drink. It quenches your thirst. You might also say that it's type 2 diabetes in a can. It calls to mind Christmas, with those commercials with polar bears. Friendship, because of the Cokes with people's names on them. Authenticity, because it's the real thing, so the slogan goes. It might mean something about multinational corporations, or the fast food industry, or capitalism, or America, or whatever. The possibilities of subjective meaning that anything might have for you are limitless, and you recognize that other people may share your meaning or hold some other meaning. You also recognize that Coke can mean many things to many people, just like yourself. Bloomer's second premise is that meanings arise through interaction with others. How do you know what meaning to make of a can of Coke or of Coke itself? Well, you've interacted with people. You've also interacted with Coke, with commercials, with vending machines, with corporations. Others, people and things, have shaped the meaning that you attach to Coke. Finally, Bloomer says that meanings are modified through an interpretive process. Coke means many different things to many different people, but whatever meaning or meanings we hold for Coke are not static. They can change as we think about them and have new interactions. So, if I'm walking down the street at night, enjoying a can of Coke, and someone tries to mug me, then the Coke might take on the meaning of a thing with which to defend myself, right? Get away from me, right? Smashing someone with my can of Coke. Hopefully it is full and not empty, and so the aluminum does not just crush, and then the mugger is even madder at me. If I'm at the beach and I finish drinking my ice-cold Coca-Cola, then it may change from a Coke or a can to trash. Our interpretations of things are shaped by social contexts, which themselves are always changing. Now, go back to Bloomer's first premise. If the meaning of something has changed for me, then I am going to act toward it based on the modified meaning. I wouldn't throw away an ice-cold Coke, but if I drink most of the Coke and it's almost empty and it's warm and it's flat, then that Coke's significance to me has changed, and now I might throw it away. It might become trash. And most people would do this, because we tend to share the meanings of things. When we all throw our cans of Coke away, we create garbage. A lot of garbage. We all generally share the same meaning of garbage, and because of this, and because we create a whole lot of garbage, then we need garbage companies, and landfills, and government agencies, and international waste management systems, and so on, all because each of us collectively threw away our can of Coke. So symbolic interaction says that the small things pattern up to create the big things. Trash itself is a social construct. What that means is the way that we tend to collectively define it, the way that most of us individually define trash and assign meaning to things that are or will become trash, is so widely shared and influential across time and space so as to become part of our objective reality. Social constructs are social facts. Think about trash as an example. Trash is the product of human interaction. Trash has persuasive or coercive power. You can see this, or rather smell it, if you don't get rid of trash, right? Trash compels us to get rid of it. Social constructs are part of our culture. They become very important because they are so widely shared and influential. Our culture generates a lot of trash, for example. We create a lot of things and we like to get new things. Therefore, there are a lot of old things that people don't want anymore. And that's more or less what trash is, right? It's things that you don't want. Rotten food, a shirt with holes in it, your intro to sociology textbook after you finish this class. No, just kidding. That's not trash. It's treasure. But you know that one person's trash is another person's treasure. Some old things we don't want may also be recycled or upcycled or restored or traded or sold or given away or shot into space to orbit the Earth forever. And these are all different ways of dealing with old things that we don't want anymore. These are all possible in our culture and are related to our values and norms. But how do you learn about your culture? How do you learn what to do with the things that you don't want? You learn about your culture and the social constructs that are integral to it through your socialization, which is the lifelong learning process by which you internalize norms, values, and beliefs that allow you to become successful members of social groups. When you were a child, your parents probably taught you to throw away your trash. Your school may have taught you about recycling. Through the process of socialization, you learned about trash and Coke and everything else, and you continue to learn, whether you know it or not, that the social constructs and social facts that make up your culture that you internalize through the process of socialization, you learn that those social constructs and social facts are what we call socially constructed. This means, and go back to symbolic interactionism, that things are associated with ideas and meanings, and that everything is connected through webs of meaning. The reproduction of culture through socialization makes society possible. That is, culture is shared widely throughout and across societies. Culture can be local. Think about the things unique to your neighborhood or your city. Regional. Think about the accents of Southern Americans versus Americans from New York. Sorry for the bad accents. Culture can be national, like Mexican food or German food, and even global, something that's multinational, that's spread all over the globe, like Facebook. I have said that we internalize culture through socialization, and given in-depth examples of how we make meanings of things like Coke and trash. But how else can we think about culture? What exactly do we learn about it? Well, broadly speaking, we can learn about two types of culture, material culture and symbolic culture. Material culture are physical objects like clothing, buildings, and art that we give meaning to. Symbolic culture are the non-material or intangible things like ideas, values, norms, beliefs, and language. These are two sides of the same cultural coin because most anything you can think of has elements of both material and symbolic culture. For example, the meaning that we give to any material thing is a symbolic aspect of that thing. This is a birthday card. The images and words on it are symbolic, as are the feelings and sentiments that it elicits. It says, "You are the sprinkled donut in a sea of glazed." This card, therefore, calls to mind the ideology of individualism. I am unique and special. And it makes me feel love. My mom gave it to me and she wrote, "Sending lots of love and hugs," and she signed it Mom/Ann. It's a social norm to give a birthday card to your child. So this piece of material culture, the card, the physical thing, is layered with meaning and interrelated with symbolic culture, like ideas, norms, and language. And this works the other way too. Think about any piece of symbolic culture and consider how it may be made manifest in physical objects, in material objects. In what forms are ideas represented? The value of patriotism is made manifest by a flag, eternal love and commitment by a wedding ring. The non-material words that I'm speaking are objectified when I type them onto a computer, upload them to YouTube, and then you see them as material things called subtitles. Symbolic culture allows us to communicate and share meaning, and people in particular cultural groups tend to share meaning of material and symbolic culture with one another, although perhaps not always with people in other cultural groups. The meanings of things depend on culture, yes, but also on context, time, place, or prior knowledge. Most of you are familiar with the signifiers, the signs and symbols, on this slide. The sign on the bottom left, the yellow sign, you see while driving. It represents 2 lanes of traffic merging, and if you're on the road with me, I really hope that we share the meaning of the symbol. Not sharing the meaning of the symbol can result in car crashes, serious stuff. And even if we do share the meaning of the symbol, we don't always act like it. So when Bloomer said that we act toward things based on the meanings they have for us, well, yeah, but we're inconsistent sometimes. Or rather, we can say that the nuances between very similarly shared meanings can result in big differences in behaviors. So you and I know that the yellow sign means that traffic lanes are merging, but how we should go about merging, we may not agree upon. I think we should use the zipper method. left car, left car, right car, but maybe you don't. Or maybe you do, but you just don't do it every time. How many times do people on the road seem to ignore that the lanes are merging and they won't let you in? That's frustrating. It's not that they don't know that the sign means merge, there are other factors to consider for why people might not do it. The silver button is a much newer symbol and it means power. You press it to turn on a device. If you Google power button, you'll see tons of images with this symbol. It's actually a synthesis of two other symbols, a vertical line that means on and a circle that means off. These symbols are more universal than the English words, yield, on, and off. And these symbols were actually created to be understood by people regardless of what language they speak, a universal symbol. A lot of people think that the line and the circle are binary for 1 and 0, but that's actually not true. The vertical line actually has another name. It's also called 5007. The circle is 5008, and the complete power symbol here is 5009, according to the International Electrotechnical Commission. And actually the symbol on the slide is technically also for standby or low power. The power symbol and the actual power symbol, the vertical line is completely inside the circle, but we don't see that one as much. It's interesting. So this one has taken on sort of a more shared meaning that's not the official meaning, which happens. So symbols can have heightened meaning for people in particular groups or subcultures, like electrical engineers. You wouldn't know how many layers of meaning are involved in that circle with a line through it unless you're part of some subculture of electrical engineers, or unless you're just really good at trivia, or you look this stuff up to make a point about symbols and meaning for a lecture. The same thing is true for the sheet music in the middle. We all probably recognize this as sheet music, but unless you are a musician, you probably don't know for what instrument this is, how to play it, how it might sound, and so on. Your prior knowledge, maybe you took band in middle school and learned to read music, can lead you to interpret symbols differently or more in depth than other people. And on the right, I think that the cancel or no symbol is pretty universal. The circle with the line crossing through whatever is forbidden. Smoking, eating, or drinking, no flammable goods. Americans are used to these, but no durian? What's a durian? Bug. What's a durian? A durian is a very stinky fruit. It smells like raw sewage or bad farts. If you go to Singapore, you are forbidden from bringing durian on public transportation because it smells so bad. If you've never had a durian, you're in for a treat. I actually kind of like it. It tastes like custard if you can get past the smell. Go to an international farmer's market, see if you can find some. Tell me what you think of it. Tell me why you think it's banned on public transit in Singapore. But we don't have durian in the United States, and so we would never see this particular sign here. So symbols are rooted in place as well. Gestures are like this too. Gestures are signifiers made with our body. Holding two fingers up, like the woman in the hijab, is the letter V in sign language, also a peace sign, and a popular pose for photos, right? How do we know which of these meanings for the same gesture that the person means? We look at context. Similar gestures have very different meanings. Keep your palm outward while making the V in England. If you do the palm inward, it means up yours. Very rude, quite the opposite of peace. Beckoning someone with your finger in Indonesia or Hong Kong is considered really rude because that's how you call a dog. I saw a fight one time in a McDonald's in Indonesia one time when a man taunted another man by doing that. We've got Trump and Biden down there winking at each other, very cute. Or is it a blink? Or do they have something in their eye? If it is a wink, then what kind of wink is it? Is it a knowing wink? Is it a wink that acknowledges someone? Or is it a flirtatious wink? Here you should begin to see the limitations of a static image for discerning the meanings of gestures. The gesture itself, and therefore the meaning we might attach to it, would be much clearer if we had more context, say a video. The baby with its middle finger raised really doesn't like you. Does it understand the meaning of the gesture that it's making? Well, we know that the baby doesn't know what flipping the bird means, or the phrase fuck you. How old would a kid have to be before you thought that they knew what that meant, like really knew? 5 years old? 6 years old? 10 years old? When I was in 3rd grade, I was sent to the principal's office for flipping off a teacher. A classmate dared me to do it. I knew that it was something bad, but I didn't understand how bad it was or what it really meant. I didn't share the meaning of the gesture that my classmate or my teacher did, and so I was punished for using the gesture without really understanding its meaning. A lot of these examples are like that. You may be sanctioned, that is, suffer a negative consequence, if you don't understand the cultural meaning of the gesture that you are making. When you travel, this is really important. Finally, in the upper right, you use digital gestures all the time. These are signifiers made with digital bodies or that represent digital bodies. The screenshot there is from a game called Portal 2, and you can high five, you can hug, you can play rock, paper, scissors with your partner. There are some really common digital gestures that we all use. Emojis. So we have seen that both material and symbolic culture vary from social group to social group, and the meanings that we associate with cultural expression, such as gestures, can vary based on culture, time, place, context, prior knowledge, and more. I want to emphasize how difficult it can be to understand or feel comfortable in another culture, or even around people from another culture, due to unfamiliarity with their material and symbolic culture, their signs, symbols, artifacts, norms, beliefs, and so on. We've all experienced this. Often Americans feel like this if they are the only person of their racial or ethnic group in a space with people of another racial or ethnic group. The only black person in a room full of white people, especially in a rural area. The only white person in a room full of Hispanic people, especially if they are all speaking Spanish. Imagine a time when you felt culture shock, that is, a sense of disorientation or being out of place when you suddenly found yourself in an unfamiliar cultural situation. Maybe you traveled to Beijing, China, and went to a market where people lined up for delicacies and snacks like scorpion, starfish, and seahorse, and you were the weird one for making a face and not eating it. Scorpions, by the way, taste kind of like popcorn, fried, salty, crispy, kind of like crickets if you've had those. What foods do you eat that people from other cultures might find strange or even taboo? Imagine going to a religious service for a religion that is unfamiliar to you. A Christian going to a mosque, a Muslim going to a traditional Chinese temple during ancestor worship. How do you make sense of what is going on? How do you identify pieces of material culture and understand the symbolic culture that is all around you? So we know that it can be difficult to analyze or interpret cultures that are different from our own, but what about turning inward to analyze our own culture? On the one hand, we are insiders in our own culture and know a lot about it because it is the primary culture into which we are socialized. As children, we cannot even imagine social reality being any different, aside from fantasy. The world that children are socialized into is the only conceivable world for them. So we are good at being insiders, but on the other hand, it is difficult to view your own culture objectively, or much differently than you already do because you are so close to it. Remember, Durkheim said that air is no less heavy because we do not detect its weight. And a fish doesn't know that it's in water until it experiences the air. It is hard to see what you take for granted any differently. So pause this video and read this anthropological account of body rituals among the Nasarima people. After you read, think about how you would characterize these people. So really, if you haven't already, pause the video and read now because we're about to analyze this. Okay, so how would you characterize these people? What kind of people are they? Where do you think these people live, and when do you think these people might have lived? Students often say that this sounds like it's describing a tribe somewhere. They might live in the jungle, somewhere remote, definitely not in a modern city, not in Atlanta. Maybe they lived in the past, because we know that there aren't many people left who live like this. Students often say that these people are superstitious, because of their potions, their magical powders, their rituals, and their belief that the condition of their mouths has a supernatural influence on all social relationships. But I wonder if you see anything familiar in the strangeness here. How might these people be like you? Well, they live in families, and each family member does something alone every day. It involves the mouth. If they don't do it, they think their teeth will fall out. To prevent this, they put something in their mouth and they move it around in a highly formalized series of gestures. Does this sound like something you do? Pause the video and read it again to see if you can figure it out. By this point, some of you are having a moment of realization. Aha! This is describing what you do every day, going into the bathroom and brushing your teeth. But it's described quite differently than you would describe it. It's described from an outsider's perspective, from the perspective of someone not from your culture, an alien perhaps, or a human from somewhere else where they don't clean their teeth like you do. Now, of course, most everyone in the world cleans their teeth in the same way, which is an example of global culture, but that wasn't always the case. Each family has a shrine, a bathroom. Its focal point is a box or a chest built into the wall, the medicine cabinet. Inside that are charms and potions, medicine, lotion, toothpaste, deodorant, cologne, hairspray. Beneath the medicine cabinet is a font, which means a source of water, a sink. Every day, each family member goes into this room and performs a rite of ablution, which means cleansing. Do you believe that the condition of your mouth influences your social relationships? Of course you do. You don't see it as supernatural, but norms surrounding our teeth, smiles, and breath might as well be. They are so strong. Consider how central the mouth is in American culture. And Nasarima, by the way, is just American spelled backwards. It is central to beauty norms. There are massive industries intersecting the mouth, from beauty to hygiene to healthcare. It's a gendered part of our bodies, meaning that there are different expectations about men's mouths and women's mouths, namely who should put what on their lips, and I guess who should have what growing on their upper lip, right? Smiles, frowns, and other mouth shapes carry great meaning. There's great pressure to have perfect teeth. In many ways, we are told to fix bad teeth, and so on. You may not have thought about the significance of the mouth in American culture like this, but this is a way to describe it. Similarly, you may describe what you observe in another culture in a way that locals would never think to describe it. So there are benefits and pitfalls to being both an insider and an outsider in any culture. There are two basic ways to look at culture. One is ethnocentrism, which is the belief that your culture is normal, better, the gold standard against which other people and cultures are judged. Key to this isn't just a recognition that other cultures are different from yours, but a belief that they are abnormal or inferior, and also that the people in those cultures are abnormal or inferior. If you read about the Nasarima and you looked down upon their culture, if you said they are savage or stupid or immoral or something like that, then you are exhibiting ethnocentrism. It's understandable. We are socialized to be ethnocentric. We learn that our culture, that our way of life is good and right, and that some other people's ways of lives are bad and wrong. Consider the dominant American view of communists, for example. Communism is seen as a perennial threat, enemy to freedom-loving Americans everywhere. Our way of life is good and right, and theirs is bad and wrong. Someone socialized in a communist society would learn the same thing, that communism was good and right, and that capitalism was bad and wrong. Ethnocentrism is therefore a subjective position. You can see all sorts of examples of ethnocentric worldviews throughout history, including manifest destiny, which was the ideology during the colonial and expansionist periods of American history that justified the westward expansion of the United States. One key tenet of manifest destiny was that American culture was superior to that of Native Americans, who were viewed as savages with inferior culture. Another key tenet of manifest destiny was that it was ordained by God. If the United States was God's chosen country and Americans were God's chosen people, then God wanted Americans to spread their superior culture westward, except that there were already people there, the Native Americans. But if God favored white European Americans, that means he didn't favor the Native Americans. This justified the annexation of native territories, the removal of Native Americans from their land, the expansion of slavery of black Africans into new territories, and ultimately a genocide that reduced the Native American population in North America from about 5 million when white settlers arrived to a little over 200,000 by 1900. Genocides happen because of extreme ethnocentrism, taken to its logical end. If I am culturally superior to you, and often people who commit genocide believe that they are biologically or genetically superior too, then why shouldn't I eliminate you from the from the pool of human cultural and genetic evolution? You can see this quote from Adolf Hitler saying the same thing. Nature is cruel, he says. People are culturally and genetically different. Some people are superior and others are inferior, he says, and the superior people, Germans in his case, Aryans, should have the right to eliminate those who are inferior, Jewish people, people with disabilities. So viewing culture from an ethnocentric perspective can be quite dangerous, especially if taken to its logical end. But remember what you've learned about the sociological imagination, about the theory of mind. Just like we grow up and learn that other people have unique feelings, subjective ways of seeing the world, and logical reasons for their thoughts and behaviors, even if we disagree, we can learn the same thing about cultures. People from different cultures have different reasons for believing what they believe, for doing what they do. Cultures that have practiced cannibalism, however wrong or taboo it is in our culture, they had cultural reasons for doing so that made sense within the context of their culture. It may have served religious functions or something like that. Our culture provides both the values that guide our sense of right and wrong and the rationales for justifying our actions based upon what we think is good and bad. I'll suggest to you that when we hate other people from another culture, when wars have been fought over cultural, political, or religious differences, that people didn't develop sociological sympathy, which is the idea that sociologists try to understand other people as they understand themselves. The other basic way to look at culture is called cultural relativism. This is like sociological sympathy. It's the principle of understanding other cultures on their own terms, by their own logics, not judging or evaluating them negatively according to the gold standard of your own culture. This isn't easy because, as I have shown, we're not good at setting aside what we think we know, of getting outside the mindset of our own culture to actually experience another culture on its own terms. A great way to practice developing a culturally relativistic perspective is to spend time among people of another culture and try to see the world from their perspective. Talk to them, observe them, seek to understand their values, norms, beliefs, and how they make sense of the world. If you have a chance to live in another country, go for it. Developing a culturally relativistic perspective can be uncomfortable, but it is extremely important. Imagine ethnocentrism and cultural relativism on a continuum. You may fall anywhere between the two, and you can move along the continuum. And like ethnocentrism, cultural relativism isn't without its problems either. It also has an extreme version, which is that if we shouldn't judge another culture from the perspective of our own culture, then there's nothing that's universal. There are no universal truths. Bug. There are no universal truths, no universal rights or wrongs. If another culture is practicing female genital mutilation, or a government sends its religious minorities to re-education camps, then from an extreme relativist perspective, we should allow these things to happen because they make sense in the context of those other cultures, and it's not our place to judge. So you'll be able to move between ethnocentric and culturally relative views, but you may want to avoid the extremes. Every culture has its values, as I have said, which determine what is good and bad, right and wrong. We tend to uphold the dominant values in our culture because they make us who we are, and they both explain and justify our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. Our values, though, are ideal. We often don't live up to them as individuals or as a larger collective, at least not all the time. There's a difference between ideal culture, embodying the values that we aspire to, and real culture, how we express cultural values in everyday life. We are a mess of contradictions. For example, what is marriage, ideally? In American culture, we actually have common vows that define this, in sickness and in health, for richer or for poorer, till death do us part. To be married means to love someone unconditionally until you die. We also tend to marry for love, and we tend to be monogamous. Well, unless you cheat. And a lot of research suggests that around 15 to 25% of married partners have cheated, however they may define that. That's a lot of people. And 50% of marriages, 50, end in divorce. And this percentage is even higher for second marriages and beyond. We also understand that there are other forms of non-monogamous or polyamorous relationships, and that the traditional definition of marriage between a man and a woman has expanded to include same-sex couples, not just in terms of shifting informal social norms, but in law, although it is by no means universally agreed upon throughout American culture, and nothing is. So, just like it was hard to define Coke earlier in this lecture, it's actually really hard to come to an agreement on what marriage is in reality. We tend to agree on most points about the ideal version, but our practice of marriage is all over the place, and that has real consequences for people. This example shows that there is always a gulf between ideal and real culture, which is often a result of conflicting values. Subcultures are subgroups in society with distinct norms, values, and lifestyles, often revolving around a particular interest. Take our example of marriage earlier. The dominant American social construct of marriage is a monogamous love marriage, but subgroups in American society construct marriage differently. Some Mormons and subgroups of other religious faiths practice polygamy, usually with one man being married to multiple women. This isn't legal in the United States, so you immediately see how subcultural norms and values can conflict with those of the dominant culture. So these people will marry one person legally and then marry the others in the church without official marriage licenses. Depending on state cohabitation laws, they may or may not all live together too. You can see the long-running TV show about a Mormon polygamous family called Sister Wives for a really interesting example. Another relationship-related subculture is not polygamy, but polyamory, which means to have multiple romantic and usually sexual relationships with other consenting adults. You can see on the brief list of subcultures from Wikipedia on the slide that BDSM is there, another subculture where people's sexual relationships are quite different than those of most people. You are likely a member of various subcultures as well, perhaps revolving around fandoms from anime to sports teams, or hobbies from hardcore gamers to hikers. Countercultures are subcultures within society that openly reject or oppose a society's dominant norms and values. The subcultures I mentioned on the previous slide mostly aren't countercultures because they generally fit neatly within the dominant culture. Although they may have some unique norms, for example, members of a video game streaming subculture might spend 8 hours per day on Twitch hanging out, playing, and watching their game of choice, they aren't opposed to those of mainstream society in a way that brings them into conflict. The one exception might be polygamists, because they challenge a fundamental norm and value of American society, monogamous marriage, and that has brought them into conflict with many people and institutions. Key to a counterculture is that they don't just oppose dominant norms and values by being quiet about it, doing whatever it is they do in their own homes. Countercultures often seek to change society, to put forward their own oppositional norms and values as the ones that people should adopt. Countercultures are often equated with social movements. The most famous countercultural movement is the hippie movement in the 1960s. Peace, love, drugs, and rock and roll. One characteristic of hippies was their anti-war stance, publicly opposing the Vietnam War. You can see here a famous picture of Berkeley student protesters placing flowers in soldiers' guns. Make peace, not war, man. Other countercultural examples may be political extremists, the Ku Klux Klan, or white supremacist groups today, though that used to be dominant culture in America, the Animal Liberation Front and the animal rights movement more broadly, terrorist organizations, sovereign citizens, and the off-grid movement. What norms and values do these people hold that put them in opposition to the dominant culture? How do they go about trying to educate people, or sometimes force people, to adopt different norms and values? A key point here is that culture is always changing. Culture changes from the bottom up and from the top down, from within a culture and from external forces. It is dynamic, not static. We engage in culture wars, which are clashes arising over which norms and values should be dominant. Many of the examples of culture that we've talked about in this lecture have been caught up in the culture wars. From how we should think about Coke, culture wars about health and food. Trash, culture wars over sustainability and the environment. Marriage, culture wars over the definition of marriage, sexuality, and gender. And video games, culture wars over games and violence. Remember that our culture supplies us with values and rationales for believing what we believe and for acting how we act. And subcultures and countercultures, they do the same thing. Crucially, we are socialized into cultures, subcultures, and countercultures. The process of socialization begins before you are born and lasts until you die. How can socialization begin before you're born? Think about it. Your sense of self started to be constructed before you were born, too. Why? Did your parents name you before you were born? Did they decorate a room for you, buy clothes for you? What is the main determinant of most babies' names, of the color their rooms are painted, of the objects represented on their clothes? It's the baby's sex, whether ultrasounds reveal that the baby will be born male or female. That's why my parents named me David, and bought me baby clothes with monster trucks on them, and painted my bedroom blue. Who I would become, how others like my parents saw me and see me today, how I see myself, how I see the world, all started to be formed even before I was born. Gender socialization begins real early. And we continue to learn values, beliefs, and norms of various social groups until we die. I mean, toward the end of your life, you actually have to learn how to die, unless you die suddenly. According to the National Cancer Institute in 2020, about 40% of Americans will be diagnosed with cancer at some point in their lifetimes, and about 1 in 5 deaths, 20% in the US, are from cancer. So there's a high chance, about 40%, that you'll get a cancer scare at some point, and a decent chance, about 20%, that it'll kill you. And so many of us will learn how to become a cancer patient, and most of us will learn how to be among the dying of cancer or anything else, perhaps in a long-term care facility, or in hospice, or in a hospital, or from a support group, or from internet forums. We will learn how to die. Socialization is the internalization of culture. This process ensures that society will continue to exist. It ensures that people in societies and smaller social groups share a way of life through commonly held norms, values, and beliefs. Socialization is incredibly effective at producing conformity. It's why children hold the same religious, political, and social views of their parents, at least until they get a bit older. To some extent when they get into high school, but especially after they go off to college, their social worlds are expanded as they encounter new people, places, and ideas. We are socialized by agents of socialization. There are 4 classic agents of socialization: family, education, peers, and religion. There are, of course, many others, including gender, work, and total institutions like prison or the military. Agents of socialization are social groups, institutions, and individuals that provide structured situations in which socialization takes place. You are socialized to become a college student, for example, through the institutions of education and peer groups, through actually going to college, and through hanging out with peers in college. Your professors may also be agents of socialization who are important as you learn what is expected of college students. You probably notice one important agent of socialization that I haven't mentioned here yet, and that is arguably one of the most important ones, especially in your and my lifetime: media. Reality is filtered for you through the media that you consume: TV, movies, TikTok, news, Google image searches. There are 8.5 billion searches on Google per day as of 2023. That means that 8.5 billion times per day, Google is telling someone something about social reality. And we tend to trust Google. We rarely click past the first or second page, especially once we've got an answer that makes sense to us. If you type poor person, for example, into Google image search, Google will give you a cultural idea of what a poor person looks like. If you type beautiful woman into Google image search, Google will show you what kind of woman is beautiful. But are these images accurate? Is this really what poor people and beautiful women look like, or just what Google is showing us? I want you to think about how Google socializes us. How does Google teach us shared norms and values? That is, how does Google show us what reality is like, or at least a version of reality? And you might already be asking, is what Google shows us really what reality is like? What if Google is wrong? Can Google and other forms of media shape reality for us? Of course they can. And this leads to the question of whether media is a mirror or a molder. Does it simply reflect reality as it is back to us, or does it create our reality? How much power do we actually have to shape our reality, given the ubiquity of media of something like a Google search engine? This video might have a couple hundred views in a couple years, and a couple hundred students will have been through my class. Google has me beat by about 8.5 billion hits. So you can see all this for yourself. I actually want you to try some of your own Google image searches. I've given some examples in the slide, and you can be creative in coming up with more. Note that I have been doing this activity with students for over a decade, and some searches look different now than they used to. For example, it used to be that searching 3 white teenagers produced images of 3 happy, smiling, innocent-looking white boys and girls, while searching 3 black teenagers produced images of 3 mean-looking black teenagers' mugshots. As people have become more aware of the ways in which Google searches can return biased, stereotypical, or unrepresentative results, the searches themselves have changed. Google appears to have become more reflexive, and it's really interesting to see how these searches change over time. Consider that agents of socialization filter cultural information and may seek to shape and share meaning in ways that perpetuate or challenge institutions and ideologies. Fundamentalist Christian parents likely aren't painting a positive picture of Muslims for their children. China's state-controlled media apparatus isn't praising the virtues of American capitalism. And since the Chinese government controls their intranet, Chinese citizens can't easily access alternative viewpoints, even if they thought to do so. Consider the power of socialization in shaping culture and society, and in shaping people, and the benefits of wielding that power. George Orwell, in his book 1984, said that whoever controls the present controls the past. He was talking about how governments, media, and education control what citizens know about current events and their own national history. This is relevant today. For example, as we see education in the middle of a culture war, it always is. But specifically now, what we teach about race and gender. The state of Florida's revised social studies academic standards have caused an uproar for several reasons. But most importantly, the one that says slavery could be good for slaves. I am literally quoting from the standards at the bottom of page 6. You can find them at the bottom of page 6, standard SS.68.AA.2.3 regarding African American history. It says that students will, quote, examine the various duties and trades performed by slaves, e.g. agricultural work, painting, carpentry, tailoring, domestic service, blacksmithing, transportation, end quote. It then adds that, quote, instruction includes how slaves developed skills which, in some instances, could be applied for their personal benefit, end quote. So, Florida students are now required by law to learn that slavery was, in some instances, good for slaves because they learned trades that could be applied for their personal benefit. I mean, they were still enslaved. It's not like they learned carpentry and then were freed to go become carpenters. The skills they learned simply made them more valuable to their masters and increased their exploitation. The band Rage Against the Machine takes Orwell's quote further and points out that it's not only who controls the present that controls the past, but that control of the past is control of the future. Our understanding of national history, including our characterization of slavery and race relations, shapes how we think about those things now, obviously, but also how we will think about them in the future. If we don't want people to be upset over racial politics, then teaching them that slavery really wasn't that bad in the past, that slaves could learn trades for their personal benefit, then we produce citizens who are less concerned about identifying or addressing racial inequities today and in the future. And then we've got Marx here at the end, ties this to power and money. He says that the rich among us, those with money and the power to produce things, the drivers of industry, the media moguls, the media owners, that sort of thing, are the ones whose ideas are most widely shared. So power is also very important when we think about socialization. But we've gotten quite macro here at the end, talking about how powerful agents of socialization like politicians and educational institutions shape culture. We started this lecture on the other end of the micro-macro continuum, looking at how symbolic interactionism says that meanings are the building blocks of society, that we act toward things based on the meanings that those things have for us. So you can think about we as you and me, and you can think about we as all of society. We've said that social constructs, social facts, are external to us and coercive, but widely agreed upon. Social constructs are part of culture, and we learn culture through the process of socialization. Our realities are socially constructed, meaning that we layer objects with ideas, fold concepts into one another, and build connections between them. Through the process of socialization, of internalizing the norms, values, and beliefs that allow us to participate in social groups, we also develop our sense of self, an overarching sense of who we are, and our unique personal identities. We are always being socialized, and our sense of self is always developing. These processes are never finished, and they go hand in hand. Socialization helps us understand who we are, our understandings of gender, race, social class, citizenship, and history, both our own history and that of our cultural groups. Next time, in the next video, we'll delve into social identities, which are key aspects of ourselves. Thank you very much. Additional resources here. I'll flip through the videos and readings and other things in case you're interested for more.